Hey YouTube, this is Coldwater from Phantom Trading, and welcome to today's video on what to expect in your first year of trading. Now in this video, what we're going to cover is the average time that it takes for someone to go from not having any experience at trading at all, or maybe they have some experience from a previous community that they were a part of, all the way to getting funding and eventually building up and maintaining consistency as a trader. Right. Now this is based off of the 9,000 or so students that we've taught over the past 2 years. It's given us a pretty interesting look at what it takes for somebody to actually become a professional trader. Right. Now results are not always going to be typical. There are going to be people that come in to Phantom Trading. There actually is somebody that I was talking to the other day who's still with us now, 15 months later. But he came and joined Phantom, 15 months ago, and within 4 or so months he was able to actually get funding through one of the prop firms that's available, and he now has 200k in funding, and he's been consistently getting payouts ever since then. Right now, that particular student, I would consider him kind of an outlier. It's not typical that somebody is able to get funding that quickly. Again, it does happen, but I think on average it usually takes about a year for somebody to actually build up the skills that they need, both from a technical and psychological standpoint, in order to be able to actually trade the market profitably. It's not an easy thing to be able to do. Right now, on the other side, the other spectrum of things, obviously there are also going to be traders out there that maybe don't have as much free time to actually spend on studying and learning and actually getting direct experience from trading the live market, and it may take them 2 years to actually find consistency, or longer even, right? And so we're going to kind of cover all of that, but again, I just want to be clear, this is a very general timeline that I'm going to give you guys, and it totally depends on your obligations in life, whether you work a full-time job or not, or if you have the free time to really spend to study and learn how to trade. Okay, so before we dive into it, let's quickly define what a consistently profitable trader is. A consistently profitable trader is someone who's trading one or more funded prop firm accounts or a personal account with live funds in it, and has been able to produce consistent returns over a period of 6 to 12 months or more. Right now, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have a positive month every month. You may have a break-even month or somewhat negative month, but the point is, are you able to make new equity highs within your equity curve, within your accounts, over that span of time, right? Obviously, the longer that you've been able to produce a consistent return, the more consistent you really are, right? So moving on, some of you may be familiar with the funded trader roadmap here, and what I have in front of us is really the most basic and simplistic form of it, wherein you'll study, practice, implement, and eventually get to funding. And what I've done is I've actually deconstructed the funded trader roadmap and kind of chunked it down into a more realistic scenario, something that most of you can pretty much expect that you'll go through on your road to consistent profitability over here on the right. So the one thing I want to quickly mention about this timeline is that people who join Phantom Trading or any course, they typically mix together the first 3 items that are on the list, right? They're not just going to sit there and study the course alone, and I would actually urge you to practice and open a demo trading account so you can practice trading the strategy that you're trying to learn how to trade in a live market environment, right? Obviously, if you sit there and just consume a bunch of course content without taking notes or actually trying to apply it on a even a chart on TradingView, obviously that's not going to work out very well, right? You're not going to retain the information as well as you possibly can, and you don't actually get any of that direct experience from practicing it on an actual chart, right? All right, so with that out of the way, let's actually go over the 4 different phases that you're going to go through on your journey to becoming a consistently profitable trader. Number 1 is going to be the study phase, where again, you're going to be spending time watching the course content. You're going to be learning about the basics of structure and order flow, liquidity, the entry models. And again, you're going to be taking notes and ideally building case studies in TradingView. Maybe you're saving it into your Notion, right, or your journal, and you're just trying to grasp all of the concepts so that you can start building your pattern recognition skills. Next on the list is the practice phase, where you're going to be spending a lot more time doing end of day markups, honing your multi-time frame analysis skills. This is super crucial. Of course, backtesting with bar replay, or doing it in hindsight using TradingView. Again, you're going to be building more case studies and really solidifying all the concepts in your head, so again you can apply them in a more live market environment. And that brings us to the next phase, which is the demo trading phase, where you're going to be taking all of the skills that you've learned and built up, and you're going to test them in that live environment, right? Either you're using a demo or a small live account, maybe it's $100 or $1,000, or it's a prop firm trial account, which I've noticed a lot of people do lately. And this is where you're going to practice your actual live execution skills, right? So it's taking the skills that you've learned and having the patience to actually sit and wait until a setup presents itself so that you can execute a trade that's within your trading plan, right? And this is again also where you're going to start building your trading habits, routines, and you're probably going to, by now you probably have some semblance of a trading plan, or you're going to be developing your trading plan as you sort of practice in demo. And then that takes us to the next phase, which is the funding challenges phase, where typically you'll purchase your first challenge account through a prop firm, and this is really where people's emotions start to get involved, because you actually have something on the line. And in the case of prop firm accounts, typically there is a time constraint and a profit target in which you need to hit within usually a 30-day mark, right? And again, that usually can kind of tilt people, because they're not used to it, they're not used to the stress of all of that. And in this particular phase, it may take you a few retrials or failures at first before you actually hit a winning challenge, right? So eventually you will pass your first challenge, right? And eventually your verification, and you're funded. All right, so I want to just quickly recap the challenges phase here, just to kind of show you what it's typically like for your average trader who's trying to get funding. Most people don't get funded right away. They usually fail their first funding challenge. It's just normally what happens, right? Either they're taking it way too prematurely, like maybe within like 3 or 4 months in. I would say that's premature, right? Because you don't really understand the strategy, nor do you have like the actual skills or confidence to back your ability to trade the strategy in a profitable way. But typically people will fail. Maybe they'll get a few retrials. That was definitely the case for me. I failed as well as took retrials before actually passing a funding challenge and verification. And typically they'll go through all of that, and eventually they will pass their first funded challenge, and then eventually get their first payout. So I just want to quickly show you guys some hard data behind this. This is a really cool study that my Forex funds posted back in December, where they showed data from October and November of their actual prop firm, the stats behind it, right? You can see here only 18% of people actually passed phase 1 of their challenge. Of those 18%, 31% of that pool of people passed their verification, and then only 4% of people who passed their verification were actually able to pass or were able to get their first profit split, their first payout, right? And it's pretty similar data or stats in November as well, right? Where there's 10%, 24%, and again, only 3% of those 24% who passed the verification stage were able to actually reach that profit split, their first profit split, right? So the reason I'm showing you guys this is not to discourage you, but just to show you that it's really not easy to pass a funding challenge, despite what people say, right? It's not easy to trade consistently and profitably, right? So if you do fail, your first funding challenge, you really shouldn't beat yourself up over it, right? And if you get a retrial, like honestly, you're doing better than most people, right? If you are able to pass it, like that's fantastic, right? But it's not typical that, literally 9% of people fail, right? Now, granted, we don't know who is taking these challenges. It could be people who are just coming in and like, literally throwing on 100 lots or something and just trying to Hail Mary the account, the first attempt that they get. I'd be willing to bet that if we ran the same study with members of the phantom trading community, we'd probably see a much higher success rate overall across these 3 metrics. So next, let's cover the funding and scaling phase. From here, the goal is really to maintain your consistency as much as possible, right? So you'll get your first payout, have your first positive month, and then what you're going to do is rinse and repeat the same steps that you previously went through in order to acquire more funding, right? So you can scale from, again, 100K to 200K to 300K, right? And so on. And again, you may or may not experience some hiccups along the way, right? You're going to have months where you're not going to be able to hit the profit target. Maybe you get a retrial, right? Maybe you just don't have that great of a month, right? And you're going to have months that are really great, and it's going to be super easy to get another funded account, right? But eventually, once you've established some sort of consistency, now we can actually talk about true consistency, which means you've acquired at least 1 to 2 funded accounts. You're now getting regular payouts from the positive months that you have. You're able to maintain positive profits over the span of 2 to 4 quarters, like I mentioned previously, right? And again, this is what we consider true consistency, right? You're self-reliant. You can rely on this as a primary source of income, right? You're consistently profitable, and now it's just about continuing to scale up, right? Now maybe you start shopping around, looking at different prop firm companies in order to scale up your prop firm capital further, right? Okay, guys, for this next part, I've actually mapped out a few graphs here to represent motivation, confidence, skill, as well as results over this 24-month period, just to give you an idea of kind of what you can expect from month to month. And again, this is just a fictitious sort of graph that I've put together, but I think this is what you can pretty much expect, for most people who are coming into trading. They're going to start off coming in with a lot of motivation and eagerness to learn how to trade. And, as you go through the process of learning, that motivation is slowly going to taper off a little bit, right? As the novelty wears off. And, once we get into the challenge phase, either you're going to be super motivated to go into it because you're starting to see some consistency in demo or in these prop firm challenge trials prior to taking an actual challenge. And, if you hit a retrial or you fail an actual challenge or verification, a lot of the times that can actually, hurt our motivation a little bit. Depending on the person, some people may actually gain motivation from that, which I think is more of a healthy way of dealing with it. But obviously, once you actually get funded and you start getting regular payouts, I think it's obvious you're going to start to see an increase in your actual motivation overall to continue to trade. Okay, moving on. As you can see here, we've mapped out confidence as well over this 24-month period. And what I wanted to show you guys in this graph is that it actually pretty closely correlates to motivation. Typically, people are going to come in maybe with not so much confidence or maybe a lot of confidence. A lot of the times I would consider it a false sense of confidence, especially if, they're just kind of going through the learning material and, practicing by doing, markups and practicing all the concepts. That's one thing that, as much as it gives you confidence, it doesn't necessarily mean that the skill is all there. Sure, you're going to have the skill to be able to mark up the charts, but it can also mean that you potentially have a false sense of confidence, right? So it's very important that we actually practice in the market in a demo account or a small live account. And I would say that's where, true confidence is really built, because you're actually in a realistic environment where you're, practicing your skills, right? You're building the domain experience that you need in order to actually trade profitably. Now, that being said, obviously, as you go through it, right, you may hit losing streaks. That's going to hurt your confidence, of course. It's very rare that people gain confidence from something like that. For the most part, that is how people are going to react to a losing streak. And same goes for, things like retrials and, losing or failing a challenge or verification account, right? You're going to take a huge hit to your confidence if you fail. But again, I'm here to tell you that you really shouldn't, and you shouldn't take it to heart or kick yourself over it, because like we looked at previously at the My Forex Funds data, most people fail their challenge accounts, right? And even verifications. So it's not a big deal if you fail a couple before you actually get funded, right? And eventually, once the skill kind of builds up, you are going to be able to pass one of those challenges and verifications and eventually get your first profit split or payout. And of course, it's going to give you a huge boost in your confidence, right? Because you actually have something to show for, all the work that you've been putting in. In the case of skill, you can see here we have a much more linear progression compared to the previous two graphs, and the reason for that is because skill really builds upon itself. You can also see that early on in this graph, it's a much more shallow progression compared to a little bit later, around the halfway mark. And the reason for that is because, starting out, you're going to be learning the trading strategy and actually learning how to mark up charts, and you're going to be developing your technical analysis skills. And while that's important, obviously once we get to, the challenges phase where we're actually, trading a challenge account or a small live account or even just a live account, this is really where our skills will start to ramp up. Our progression in building skills will start to ramp up. And the reason for that is because, we're actually starting to get emotions involved with our trading, right? So you start to develop your trade psychology as well. And finally, we have the results graph here. And as you can see, this kind of correlates with the skill graph that I showed on the previous slide. Early on, you may hit winning streaks and potentially losing streaks, but really, you're not going to start to see real results until you solidified your technical analysis skills as well as your trade psychology skills to a level that you're actually able to pull results out of the market in a consistent manner. And obviously, once you've gotten funded and, you're starting to get regular payouts and we get into the funding and scaling phase, this is really where we start to see results take off in a really rapid way, right? Because you're now consistent as a trader. The only real challenge here is continuing to scale up your funding, which, if you've done it before, you can do it again, right? All right, so now let's look at all of the different graphs mapped onto one chart. What I want to show you guys here, again, is how motivation and confidence are pretty much directly correlated. And same goes for skill and results, right? The more skill that you have and your ability to actually execute your strategy within the market, the more you're going to see results, right? And the other thing I want to mention here is in and around the challenges phase, once you've actually, gotten funded and you start getting regular payouts, at least 2 payouts or so, this is where really all of, the different things that we're talking about here converge into one point, right? And it's really going to require that you have both a mix of motivation, confidence, and skill in order to pull results, right? Because even if we have, a high level of skill, but we don't have confidence, of course, we're going to see, that's going to affect our bottom line, right? We're not going to be able to execute with confidence. And really, confidence is going to be high as a result of, having high skill, right? It is a skill to have confidence in a sense, right? Same with motivation. If you're not waking up on time in order to analyze the charts and you're really sloppy with your processes, you have low motivation, same thing. You're going to have inconsistency in the way that you trade, and that's going to result in less results overall. So I just thought I'd show you guys that. I hope you guys learned something from this. I thought it was a creative way of kind of mapping out, it is fictitious data, but I wanted to show you guys kind of how it's going to work over that 24-month period. So just to end off, I want to quickly give you guys a few pieces of advice, based on my experience, as well as, some of the other team members. Number one is you don't really need to be a genius to trade successfully or consistently. If you guys are familiar at all with Mark Douglas in his book Trading in the Zone, he actually talks about how he had coached, a bunch of people who I think most people would consider pretty smart. And they come from different backgrounds, ranging from, doctors to lawyers to business people with MBAs and stuff. And a lot of these people were not able to find consistency in trading, right? Despite the fact that they're really smart. Obviously, what's more important and what he talks about in the book is actually understanding the nature of probabilities and being able to trade and think with a probabilistic mindset. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about here before we wrap the video up is learning and practicing doesn't stop once you get funded or consistent. It's so easy to fall off of our habits and get complacent as traders, but the truth is trading is a business and you're either growing or shrinking. So it's really important to continue to hone that edge by continuing to learn, continuing to practice. It could be through doing end of day markups, back testing, watching market recaps, and of course, actually being consistent in your entire process when it comes to trading in the live market. So anyways, with that said, I want to leave you guys with those 2 little pieces of advice. which I think will help you on your journey to consistency. But that pretty much concludes the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys on the next one.